Hey guys, welcome to the Dreams Guy podcast. I'm John Thomas and I am the Dreams Guy, I guess. It's kind of funny calling yourself that, but that's what people call me, so we'll go with it. We're going through some biblical dreams and some common dreams, and on this episode, we're going to get to a biblical dream. It's interesting because this story gets told a lot, but it's often missed that it happened in a dream. We are in 1 Kings chapter 3, and I'm going to read a large portion. This is going to be verses 4 through 15. And the dreamer in this dream is Solomon, the King Solomon. So this is David's son, and he's just become king. And this is where we pick up in verse 4. It says, "Now the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, 'Ask, what shall I give you?'" Now notice, this is in a dream. This is a visitation that Solomon has. God appears to Solomon in a dream while he's there after having this huge sacrifice. And God asks, "What shall I give you?" And Solomon said, "You have shown great mercy to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in truth, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart with you. You've continued this great kindness for him, and you've given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king instead of my father David, but I'm a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in, and your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you've chosen, a great people, too numerous to be numbered or counted. Therefore, give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours?" And the speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. And then God said to him, "Because you've asked this thing and have not asked for long life for yourself, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have asked the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern justice, behold, I've done according to your words. See, I've given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has not been anyone like you before you, nor shall any like you arise after you. And I've also given you what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be anyone like you among the kings all your days. So if you walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days." And then Solomon awoke, and indeed it had been a dream. And he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord and offered up burnt offerings, offered peace offerings, and made a feast for all of his servants. So here's something that's quite interesting. Twice, it makes sure that we realize that this is in a dream. Now, a lot of times, if somebody had this crazy experience, "Oh man, I was talking to this person and they promised me this and they said that this was going to happen. And I woke up and it was all a dream." Most of us, our thought would be, "Oh, well, I guess you don't really have to pay attention. It was just a dream, right? It wasn't real." But here's something that we misunderstand. According to the biblical record, dreams are real. What happens in a dream is not just contained in the dream. Now, there are dreams that are merely information. But in this dream, something happened, something changed, something shifted. Solomon was given a promise, and the Lord released upon him an impartation that he kept all the days of his life. It was from this dream that Solomon became the wisest and the richest and the most well-known king of his day, wisest king of all days. Still to this day, we talk about the wisdom of Solomon because Solomon had so much wisdom. He's still recognized for that wisdom, but that wisdom came to him in a dream. We have to change the way that we think about dreams if we want to get close to how the Bible treats dreams. We need to treat them the way that the Bible treats them. because the scripture is not just a record of rules, but it actually is the story of how God has interacted with mankind so that we can understand who God is and how he interacts. And the things that he says, the rules, the statutes, the decrees are absolutely essential for us to understand, to create, if you will, a good theology, a good understanding of the way the world works, the way that God operates with the world. But the stories and how God interacts and what God does in history is also key. There's this principle that says that a name says function. Now, this is a Hebrew principle, and it's actually comes out of what we know about God. When someone would have an encounter with God, they would talk about this God who did this, and because he did this, he had a new name that was this. And so when he provided a ram instead of Isaac being a sacrifice, Abraham says, wow, he is Jehovah Jireh, the Lord my provider. When he showed up and he healed the Israelites of all of their diseases, he communicated to them, he goes, I am Jehovah Rapha, the Lord who heals you, because if you walk in my ways, you're not going to have to worry about any of the diseases that I put upon the Egyptians when you were coming out from among them. As he does something, it gives identity, and his identity is what he does. What he does is his identity. And so when God does something, it's a communication of who he is, not just something that happened at one point in time. God is the God who releases real transformation, real impartation in dreams. He did it for Solomon. This is a key for us to understand. Now, if this was a small impartation, maybe someone had asked for favor for a particular thing and they got favor for that particular thing, like I'm going to have a talk with a king. Maybe it was Nehemiah and in a dream, God says, I'm going to give you favor with the king. And he gets favor with the king. We could see that we could receive promises from God in dreams, but this is more than a promise. Something shifted in Solomon's life, and Solomon recognized it. You see, he comes because he's this brand new king. He knows that he needs a lot of wisdom. His dad was like David. Talk about standing in a giant shadow. He's trying to be king after David was king. Like, how do you live up to that? And yet he's here. He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to go out. I don't know how to come in. God, I need help. And so in his need for help, he goes and he pursues God. Now, a couple of the things that are going on here. He goes to Gibeon because Gibeon was where the altar had been taken. After Shiloh had been destroyed by the Philistines, the ark had been scattered in different places. The tabernacle had been scattered in different places. The ark had been taken in the war and then had, through a very long route, ended up in Jerusalem because of David bringing it to Jerusalem. But we know from this passage that the altar, and perhaps the tent, but for sure the altar that was there at the tabernacle had been taken to Gibeon, which is where Samuel was Samuel one of Samuel's home bases, and he was in charge of the tabernacle after the death of Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas. And so this is where the altar was at this particular time. Solomon wants to inquire of the Lord. So he goes there to inquire of the Lord's favor because that's what had been said in the book that he'd been given. As king, he was given a copy of the book of Deuteronomy, at least, most likely the whole book of the law. That was what was suggested in the book of Deuteronomy, that the king would be given that book so that he would know how to be wise. And so he knew that he was supposed to go to this altar to inquire of the Lord. That's where he goes, and he does 1,000 burnt offerings for a personal request. He does a great sacrifice asking for God, and God shows up and said, hey, your sacrifice got my attention. What do you want? And this is where Solomon asks. And I love Solomon's way of asking for wisdom. We talk about the great wisdom that Solomon had. What he specifically asked for is an understanding heart. And if you take a look at the Hebrew, it literally means a listening heart. He wanted a heart that would listen to the Lord above all else so that he could recognize true wisdom, so that he would know the right way to go, what was actually going on. And this thing pleased God's heart. And then Solomon's response. God says, you've got it. That you asked exactly for the right thing. I'm going to give it to you. And not only that, I'm going to give you what you didn't ask. I'm going to give you honor. I'm going to give you riches. Solomon gets up. He realizes, wow, that was a dream, which to him, that means, wow, that was a powerful encounter with my God that changed me. That's a different definition of dream than we often use. And he goes back to Jerusalem where the Ark of the Covenant was, the presence of the Lord, and he sacrifices again and throws a party for all of his friends, for those that were close to him, for his household, those that served him and that were near him, because he had received a great promise from God. The right response was sacrifice. So you have a few principles that are in this dream. There's not a lot to interpret. When we're looking at this one, what do you do with the interpretation? God said you're going to have it, you're going to have it. And so here's one of the keys that we learn about dream interpretation from this particular dream. When you have the voice of God specifically, but in general, when you have a spoken message in a dream, most often the spoken message is literal. Now, there are times when there is metaphor to it, but in this particular experience, this was completely literal. And so what was said was exactly the message, and you can receive a prophetic word from God himself in a dream. This is what Solomon did. Now, the revelation carries the power to fulfill itself. In the dream, he gets the revelation, and in the dream, he gets the impartation that causes it to happen. You can wake up from a dream completely different. Not every dream is at this level. We've looked at a number of other dreams already in this podcast out of Scripture, and many of them are messages, things that are going to happen, things that are going on, how to respond to situations. But this one is different. This is an actual spiritual encounter in the night season. In the dream, the visitation from God himself came. Solomon met the Lord, but he met him in a dream. Some of you have had encounters where you have either gone into heaven or you've encountered angels or encountered the Lord, and they were in dreams, and maybe you've discounted those things because you didn't understand that they could be real. But according to the biblical record, they can be real. Sometimes there's metaphor to those things, that's true, but sometimes it's a very real encounter. How do you know the difference? You look at the fruit that comes from it. Now, there's an aspect of being able to discern because of the Lord speaking to it. Yes, this was not just a metaphor. This is not just a promise. This actually happened. That does happen, and God does speak that. And so we're always asking, but sometimes we're not quite sure until we see the fruit of it. Solomon had the fruit of it. For the rest of his life, the fruit of this dream played itself out. And still to this day, we talk about the fruit of a dream. That's pretty cool. Fun things that we can learn from dreams. Guys, thanks for joining me this week on The Dreams Guy. We will see you next time. My name's Jon Thomas.